received a good education, and it came in handy because I would probably be out of professional sports in a couple of years. A good education always bears fruit. For me, for sure, 25 years after graduation and 15 years of working in my specialty, I got my dream job. I became a tenured professor in the engineering school of a large university in Texas, consulted on large government construction projects, and directed one of NIST's manufacturing labs. Tessa and I bought our dream home in that gated community we had always dreamed of, and life threw me straight curveballs. I was sending them out for a home run. Our oldest daughter, Tori, went to the same university as me and studied structural engineering just like her old man. My life was in an iron grip, and the light began to go out. Then the curveball arrived. At first, I didn't recognize it. I didn't even realize the ball was already in play. It came in the form of a call from Tori. "Dad, what's going on?" she asked. Nothing special," I replied. "I'm just surfing the internet." "What do you have, my love?" "I came home to get your jacket," she said. There was a truck parked there. I walked in, and Mom was there supervising the movers. She said she was moving out, that you had problems with her, and you needed time to be apart. "Why didn't you say anything?" I was stunned. "Ah, good joke, Tori." I finally managed to get out. "Dad, this is not a joke," she said. "What's happening?" "Jesus Christ, I have no idea," I said. "Are you sure, baby, this isn't a joke?" "Dad, I'm here, I'm watching." "You need to come here." "I don't know what's going on, and Mom doesn't tell me anything." "Did you do something?" It was a damn weird question. I may have done a lot of things, but I had no idea of something that could make Tessa leave. I was not an ideal husband. I knew all my shortcomings well, but she was not an ideal wife either. Nobody is perfect. I certainly wasn't a cheater. I wasn't a criminal. I didn't gain 300 pounds, and as far as I knew, I didn't have terrible body odor. I asked my graduate students to cover for me in class and exceeded the speed limit the entire way home. There it was, a truck pulled into our driveway just as Tori said. She met me outside. "She doesn't say anything," she said. "You really don't know?" "No, honey, I don't know. She didn't say a word to me about any problems." "Well, Dad, if you didn't cheat on her or be cruel to her or some crap, I'm on your side, okay? I promise I didn't do anything like that," I told her. I sighed. "Let's go see if she'll talk." "Are you sure you want to be here?" "Of course," she said. "Dad, I'll be recording this on my phone. Tytho will be interested to know what happened." Tytho is her little sister, our baby. I gave Tori a quick hug, and we went to meet the lion, so to speak. Tessa was in the living room directing the movers who were packing up the ugly living room set she supposedly couldn't live without. "Tess, what are you doing?" I asked. "I'm leaving you, Bax," she said. "I don't want to argue with you. You can't convince me otherwise. It will only make you angry, which will make me angry, and nothing good will come of it." "Geez, Mom," Tori said. "I hate to tell you this, but I'm already angry." "No, I guess I'm not. Unless you want to push me away completely, I suggest you try to make us both understand what the hell you think you're doing." Damn, she was angry. Tori was the sweetest girl on the planet, but as I learned over the years, she had a temper if she felt she had been wronged. She almost never swore. I could see that Tessa understood it, too. She gave a couple more instructions to the movers and took Tori's hand. "Let's go out onto the terrace," she said. Tori pulled her hand away, but we followed Tessa onto the terrace. She closed the sliding door and seemed to collect her thoughts. "I met someone." She finally spoke. "You don't know him. He moved here from New Mexico about 6 months ago and is a real estate developer. I'm going to be with him. I couldn't just cheat. I'm leaving." I already filed for divorce. Dax. Well, that's news, I said. You couldn't just cheat, huh? So you met yesterday, fell in love at first sight, and immediately realized that you were made for each other, right? Tori snorted. That's right. It always happens, Mom. Who do you take us for? I don't think Tori interrupted her. You're a real estate agent, Mom. You don't have to account for your time. How many nasty dates, dinners, and showings with Romeo have you already been on? This is wrong. It was my turn. Yes, that's true. You didn't just accidentally decide to leave your husband and start a relationship with your betrothed. How did you know that you were destined for each other? Okay, think what you want, she said. You can make something cheap out of this if you want. You don't have to make anything out of it, Tori said. This is cheap. I understand that you are betraying Dad, and this is between you two. What do you think will happen to me or Toida? By the way, I love you both, honey. That won't change. Tessa was quick to reassure her. I still love you, Dax. It's just she couldn't finish. That's how you claim to feel about me. Tori said. How do you think I will feel about you? How do you think Toida will feel? I know you're upset, Tessa began. You'll have to accept that nothing will change in our relationship, Tori. You'll love Charles once you get to know him. I'm not going to meet him, Tori said sharply. I don't need to deal with someone who interferes with a married woman's family. I'll tell Toida too. Our attitude has already changed. All the respect I ever had for you is gone. I'm going to see you very rarely. If you ever bring that idiot to me, I'll spit on him. Tori, I know. You don't know anything. Tori snapped. I've never been so disappointed in a person in my life. You ruined everything. God, how I hate you, Mom. Tessa looked at me helplessly. Dax, don't look at me. I told her. This is your fault. I think she began to realize the magnitude of her actions as she looked from one of us to the other. Tori grabbed my hand. Come on, Dad. I don't want to be anywhere near that Skankenstein. Tessa screamed at the evil nickname her daughter had given her, but I was already being dragged down the terrace steps by my very angry daughter. She practically dragged me to her car and helped me sit down, even opening the door for me. I felt like I was in slow motion. Talk about shock. I was a complete idiot, apparently. Tori sat down, started the car, and looked at me. Dad, you'll be okay, she said. I know you're confused right now, but I've made it my mission to make sure in the near future that the man in my life who I love the most gets through this and is happy. Now, the belt is the law. I buckled up, and it felt good. Tori has always driven like crazy, and now she's adding some extra oomph to her driving. When she received her bachelor's degree, we asked what she wanted for her graduation gift. She wanted a car, a specific one, a 2017 Audi R8 V10 Plus Spider. We could afford it, and she deserved it. She worked hard, graduated second in her class, and was accepted into graduate school. We were very proud of her. As always, when I rode with her, I held on to everything I could. Damn, baby, I complained. You'll kill me, and you won't have to worry about the near future. She laughed as always and did not slow down. We were about 10 miles from the apartment she shared with Toyota, and I know we got there in less than 10 minutes. The girls were the complete opposite, not in appearance, in that they were almost twins, but in character. It always amazes me how two children with the same parents, raised in the same house, can be so different. Tori was always energetic, always ahead, always talking, and she literally sparkled with energy. Toyota was quiet, very affectionate, extremely gentle, and the only time you saw her have the same energy as Tori was in sports. She played softball and was a dynamo on the field. Both looked like their mother, but with my skin and height. Torai was an ash blonde with beautiful straight hair that fell to her waist, and Toyota was a strawberry blonde with silky waves just below her jaw. They were gorgeous, olive skin contrasting with their hair and blue eyes. I knew I was biased, but my opinion was confirmed by the boys who had circled around them all their lives. They had been dating but had not yet seemed interested in any particular man to the detriment of others. Toyota was at home, and she screamed when she saw me, slid onto the sofa, and patted the seat next to her, inviting me to sit. "Hey, Dad, what are you doing here?" She hugged me and pressed herself to my side while Tori took an identical position on the other side. "Hi, dear." I kissed her on the cheek, which she offered me. It was one hell of a day. Her huge blue eyes looked up at me. "What's happened?" "You won't believe it," Tori said. "I'm sorry, sis, but do you know how I went to get Daddy's jacket?" Toyota nodded. "When I arrived, Mom was at home, and there was a truck in the driveway. She told me she was leaving Dad and moving out." "What?" Toyota was stunned. "You're kidding, right?" I hugged her tighter. "I'm afraid not, baby." "What did you do?" she asked. I was a little offended by this question. Torai asked the same thing. "Why did they think I did something bad?" "He didn't do anything," Tori said quickly. "It's all Mom. She met someone, some Charles, who she knows will love her." "What? How? Are you sure? Maybe you misunderstood something." Torai interrupted her. "I knew you'd say that. I recorded it." She took out her phone and played the audio recording for Toyota. Again, the reactions were the complete opposite. Taitha started crying, and by the time the drama was over, she was sobbing, breaking her little heart. Torai moved to her other side, and we formed a Taitha sandwich, holding and petting her as she poured out her broken heart. I also felt tears rolling down my cheeks, and Tori wiped her eyes too. "What are you going to do, Dad?" Taitha was finally able to speak. "I have no idea," I said. "What can I do? She's moving out. I can't force her to stay. I'm not sure I'd want to do that even if I could at this point." "Taitha, what are you going to do?" Torai asked. "I'm going to talk to Mom," she said. "I know you heard it from her. I need to hear it myself. I know the tape doesn't lie. If she tells me the same thing she told you, I'll be so mad. I'm already angry. I'll also be incredibly sad." I hugged her again, kissing the top of her head. "I know, doll. I'm still in shock." "Well, I'm not," Tori said. "Dad, you need to talk to a lawyer. Defend yourself." "Jesus, Tori, listen to yourself," Taitha said. "Protect myself? This is Mom we're talking about." "So? Mom, the woman we've known all our lives, suddenly decides she needs someone better than Dad, gets into a relationship with some shady guy, and you think she's incapable of any other shenanigans?" Torai said. I understand what you mean," Taitha said. "This seems like it's from some TV series." Torai, I know, sis. It is, but we need to deal with it. Is she still at home? Taitha asked. As far as I know, I replied. I have no idea how long she'll be there. Taitha stood up. I'll go there and talk to her, she said. Meet me for dinner. We agreed on a place and time. She grabbed her bag and left. Torai moved to sit next to me, and I hugged her. We sat in silence for several minutes, each lost in our own thoughts. Dad, do you know any lawyers? She asked. I came out of my reverie. Yeah, I guess I do. I don't know anyone who does stuff like that, really. Call someone you trust. Ask them to recommend someone, she said. I couldn't believe it had come to this. A few hours ago, I was full of blissful ignorance, and now I was talking about calling a divorce lawyer. It was a real curveball with a hard hook. I did know a lot of very influential lawyers. Some of them were my colleagues at the university, and I even knew some government lawyers. Tori and I brainstormed, came up with a name, and he actually recommended a few names. One in particular, her name was Amanda Sloan. I spoke with someone in her office, made an appointment, and was given a list of what I needed to do and bring to the meeting. I needed to gather all the necessary paperwork at home, so Tori drove me home. She packed bags for both herself and Titha and informed me that they would be living with me for the near future. I argued that they didn't need to, but she insisted. I knew better than to argue with her once she had made up her mind about something. I needed to gather all the information, and she helped me. I was working on investment accounts and gave her the login information for our bank account. I'm bad. You won't believe this, she said. What, honey? You have $50 in your checking account and $1,000 in the money market, she said. Is this enough to keep you from falling below the minimum? What? Yes, I think that's the minimum, I said. But we must have much more. Mom must have started making some very unpleasant moves. Are you going to be okay? Yeah. I'll have to move some money, open a few other accounts, I guess. I have money at the credit union that she doesn't have access to, and I'll probably use that. That's pretty cruel, Tori. Really? I think it's kind of illegal, Dad. I don't think it's going to end well for her. You'll have to ask your lawyer. We met Titha for dinner, and she was quite shocked by her conversation with her mother. I needed to hear it from her, she said. I'm sorry, and I knew you were telling the truth, but some things need to be heard for yourself. You're not mad at me, are you? No, baby. I understand, I told her. Tori hugged her. I probably wouldn't have believed it either if I hadn't been there, she said. What are you going to do? Mom's dream is for you and me to meet Charles, she said. We'll love him. I told her that I wasn't even going to date Chucky Boy, and that I didn't really want to see her either. She lied to you about what? Tori asked. She cheated. I made her tell me. I told her that if she lied to me, I would find out, and I wouldn't talk to her anymore. She was dating this guy. I'm sorry, Dad, but I don't want to have to deal with her anymore. Don't apologize to me, I said. Damn, well, now we know. I don't want to deal with her either. This was not the whole truth. I was definitely not okay, and my feelings were a complete mess, grief, sadness, confusion, whatever you want to call it. But the main thing was anger. I was incredibly angry, and everything else faded into the background. I got lucky with my lawyer. Tori and Titha took me to her and waited for me. Amanda Sloan was an intense woman of few words. She would have scared me to death if she hadn't been on my side, and she was. In 2 days, she filed for divorce, got a restraining order on our finances, and a court order for Tessa to pay every cent she took. Neither of us could transfer, spend money, or move assets except for normal daily expenses. This made Tessa call me. Why are you making this so difficult, Bax? She asked. Where am I making it difficult? I replied. I don't want to discuss this over the phone, she said. I will come. She seemed a little shocked to see Tori and Titha. Girls, why are you here? She asked. I wanted to talk to your father alone. We live here, Titha said. We don't want Daddy to be alone, Tori informed her. Don't worry, we'll leave now that you're here. They grabbed their bags and left without another word to Tessa, who seemed to want to say something but decided not to. You said you wanted to talk, I reminded her. What did you want to say? She sat down opposite me at the bar. Bax, I don't want this to be any harder than it needs to be. I still love you, I just need to be with Charles. We can be friends. We have daughters who need both parents. I have nothing to do with your relationships with the girls, I told her. You'll have to decide that. Friends? I don't think so, Tessa. I don't have friends who treat me like you. Hell, I don't even have enemies like you. Why did you get a restraining order? She asked. I was just taking money to get settled and pay moving expenses. Well, half of that money was mine, I told her, maybe even more, but so be it. You have a job, Tessa. You make good money. Yes, but you have credit union accounts from your job, she said. Yes, and you didn't put a penny in it, I told her. While we were together, everything was ours. Now I need to think about yours and mine. Let the court sort it out. I thought you said Chucky Boy was a big player. She grimaced. Stop acting like a child, Bax. His name is Charles. Do you have any idea that I care what you think? I asked. I will call him and you whatever I want. Is that all you wanted to say? No, that's not all. I want to talk about the girls. What did you tell them? I didn't say anything, I replied. Tori was here, remember? She recorded your speech and played it back to Titha. They both only spoke to you. You should have told them something, she said. They wouldn't be so angry if you didn't say anything. Listen to yourself, I said. Oh my God, Tessa, you blew us all away. They're smarter than both of us. They don't need me to tell them anything. They see what you did. How long did this go on, Tessa? Why didn't you ever say that you were unhappy with me, with us? We could have tried to fix it. She looked a little thoughtful. I wasn't unhappy, she said. Have you ever met someone who immediately seemed important to you? Did you know that you were attracted to this person like two magnets that are drawn to each other? Yes, I knew. I told her. I met you. She couldn't look at me. Can we just move on, Dax? It doesn't have to be this bitter, angry thing. We can still be friends. We've loved each other for too long to throw it all away. We could, I said. The problem is, I don't want to be your anymore, Tessa. In fact, I'd rather never see you again. This is a big city. Once the divorce is finalized, I doubt I'll ever have a reason to talk to you again. It's not like that, she said. The girls will have events, graduations, games for Titha, weddings. Life goes on, Dax. I guess so, I said. I'll do what I have to do. I'm still the same, she said. You always loved me. No, you're not, I replied. At least if you're like that, then I never really knew you. I'm done here. You can leave now. I'd rather leave, she said. Lock the door behind me. I grabbed the keys and jumped into my Jeep. I drove to the river and parked, got out, and just leaned on the front, trying to find Cam, trying to find my sender. I was there for maybe half an hour when a voice brought me out of my thoughts. Hello, Father. It was Titha. Hello, doll. How did you find me? Come on, we have a family location app on our phones, she said. You insisted on this, remember? I laughed. Yeah, I remember now. I don't think I've used it since you were about 17. She pressed herself close to me, taking my hand and placing my arm on her shoulders, comforting me. It's beautiful here, isn't it? She said. I love just looking at the river, listening to the ducks. Yes, I agreed. Well, I don't want to disturb your thoughts, but what did Mom say? She asked. She just wanted to know why I made her pay the money back. She wants us to remain friends, I told her. I mostly didn't want to, but she said we have to be together at events involving you and Tori, so I better get used to it. She was silent for a minute. I don't think you have anything to worry about, she finally said. Tori and I have talked a lot. Neither of us are going to invite her to our events, Dad. I hugged her tighter. Are you sure, doll? She nodded, her hair sliding forward on her face. Yes, I'm sure. It's not something I'm going to forgive, Dad. I see. Let's call Tori and see if she wants to join us for dinner at a Mexican restaurant, I suggested. She agreed, but Tori couldn't come. There was a project at the university, so we went together. Everything was quite predictable. Everyone knows people who have experienced divorce if they have not experienced it themselves. We have heard stories even if we never thought it would happen to us. There were many meetings back and forth. We finally worked out all the details and the divorce moved forward. The girls stayed with me for 2 weeks before I insisted they move back to their apartment. They both objected loudly, but I needed them to rebuild their lives, get back to how they were before. Listen, I told them I would be happy if you both just lived here for the rest of my life. I never wanted you to leave, but you did. I understood why then, and I understand now too. Things have changed for me, but not for you. You have your own lives. I hope there will always be a place for me in them, but I want you to be yourself. Do you understand? Yes, Dad, Titha said. We don't want you to be lonely. Call me, stop by any time, tell me you want to go out to dinner, ask me to do something with you. Do what you've always done. They hesitated a bit, and I hugged them goodbye for a long time. I understand, Dad, Tori said. I know you're right. They really continued to include me in their lives, and the day the divorce was made official, they came back and stayed with me for another week. I didn't know what was going on between them and their mother, and they never mentioned her. I kept myself busy, took on a few extra projects, and more than one course. I missed being married, having someone to have dinner with in the evening, someone to take care of, someone to do little things for. When I woke up at night and wanted to cuddle with my wife, the empty bed usually woke me up completely, and the sadness was suffocating. Over time, I got better. A year later, I realized this. Then 2 years passed. Tori received her master's degree and was working on her doctorate. Titha received her bachelor's degree and stopped working for a while to study. She got a job at a mortgage company and seemed to be making progress. Tessa intruded into our lives from time to time. She came to Titha's graduation and bothered everyone. She overheard the girls saying that we were going to celebrate the occasion and insisted on joining us. Mom, are you sure you don't need to rush back to Chucky, boy? Tori said. She frowned and looked like a storm cloud. Charles and I are no longer together, she announced. Oh, that's bad, Titha said. When did it happen? If you were talking to me, you would know that this happened 18 months ago. We've been busy, Tori said. It was better than most comedy shows. I snorted, and Tessa gave me an angry look. We arrived in different cars, so we went to the restaurant we chose for dinner. We were able to get another chair for Tessa, but the girls made it clear that they didn't want her there. She didn't stay long after dinner, and the next day, I flew to Tara to discuss plans for a resort. I was a consultant on this project and decided to invest in it as a shareholder. It was a beautiful place with a great ocean and great beaches, and I decided I was going to spend a lot of time there. I visited a few clubs, met people, danced with some beautiful ladies, got lucky a couple of times, and came home refreshed. I decided it was time to come out of my shell and start living again. I had an idea to go back to California for vacation. I was born and raised there, and I wanted to look at the old places, see how they had changed, maybe meet some of the people I went to school with, and find out how their lives turned out. I invited the girls, but they had too much to do to find time. We had a motor home, and I decided to take it. We towed a small Jeep Wrangler behind it to get around. I serviced everything, stocked up on everything I needed, and hit the road. It was fun. I stayed at campsites, attended events there, and met a lot of people, mostly couples who were doing the same thing. It was a little sad being alone, but that's the way it was. It took me 3 weeks to get there because of all the stops, but I found a spot, settled in, unhitched the Wrangler, and was ready to see the sights. I spent 3 days driving around Ventura, Santa Barbara, and AI. The places had changed, but not so much that I couldn't find my way around. I was sitting outside at the Coffee Connection on Wrangler. I was looking through the newspaper and noticed a slight commotion. Some Karen tried to go inside without a mask. Yes, they were annoying, but I thought after 2 damn years everyone knew the rules. Several people were waiting to enter, but Karen did not leave. One woman walked around to the tables in despair. She sat down and took out her phone. I assumed she was waiting for the situation to calm down. She looked very familiar. I knew I had seen her before, but I couldn't remember where. It dawned on me when Karen finally left and the woman came in for coffee. It was at that moment when I saw her walking that memories surfaced in my memory. Jossa de Leon. I remembered her now. How could I forget? She moved to AI when I was in 3rd grade. Of course, I wasn't particularly interested in girls back then, but she was seated at a desk in the next row, right across from me, and she met my gaze as she walked back to her seat. I will never forget her eyes, large, dark, almost black. She smiled at me, her snow-white teeth sparkling, lighting up her face. I was no longer the same. My attitude towards girls changed dramatically. They had become magical. She handed me a note as we worked on an assignment. It was just hello and her name. I wrote my name on another piece of paper. I wanted to keep the one she gave me. We had one break, and I was drawn to her like a magnet. I had a. What could happen? Today's first installment of a story with a similar plot. Enjoy the show. Sometimes I just stop and think about how it happened. It was more of a hobby, an opportunity to escape into a fantasy where anything was possible, rather than a daily routine to keep a roof over my head and food on the table. I was not an office worker, not a lawyer or an accountant, not a technology tycoon, not a special forces soldier, not a doctor, but in my thoughts and in my stories, I could be all that and more. I started by self-publishing on Amazon and am now ashamed of how rude they were. When I got better and could afford professional help, I took my books down, reworked them into something readable, and posted them again. The money I made in the first year was ridiculous. I didn't break even, it cost me more than I earned from publishing. I was ready to give up when earnings started to improve as I began getting noticed. Then I wrote a 4-book adventure series that really took off. Suddenly, publishers who had previously ignored me wanted to become my new best friends. I signed with one of them on the advice of my new agent and intellectual property lawyer. There was no advance, but the money I started receiving allowed me to quit my regular job and focus on my new project. It was a Western, and it did quite well. Then I wrote a novel that quickly climbed the bestseller list, reaching the top 20 of several newspapers. Sunday Morning reviewed it, and sales picked up again. Then the movie people came into play, and my agent negotiated with Amazon to do a 3-part adventure series. I was entitled to approximately $250,000 for each part. My agent smiled at my face and said that Netflix was interested in my Western and Hollywood was watching the progress of my novel. If it became even hotter, the offer would be in the low end of 7 figures. Darla and I went from making $70,000 a year together to a 7-figure income that kept growing. I had no trouble convincing her to quit her job and become one of the slackers of the rich, or maybe just one of the slackers of the almost rich. We bought toys, she chose a BMW convertible, and I bought a new Jeep truck and motorcycle. Then an opportunity presented itself, and we bought a lake house. It was a forced sale, and we got a damn good deal. The owners had legal problems and needed money ASAP. The estimated cost was $450,000, but we bought it for $300,000. Then Darla wanted a sailboat, even though she had no idea about sailing. I bought a fairly large model for the lake, and she began visiting the local yacht club twice a week, where she took lessons. I still had the work ethic instilled by years of physical labor. I tried to write 6 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week. Sometimes I simply wasted the day, other times, the words flowed from my fingers to the keyboard. If I was on the go, I could write for 12 hours straight. It may seem like I was throwing money around like a drunken sailor, but I wasn't that reckless. I paid cash for the lake house, even if we never used it. The deal was too good to pass up. I knew that in today's market, I could almost double my money if I had to sell. I paid cash for vehicles, knowing I would lose out on their depreciation. A new car is one of the worst investments in the world. It's done nothing but depreciate in value from the moment it drives off the lot. But we'd never owned anything newer than a 6-year-old car, and we allowed ourselves the luxury. I was surprised at how little impression it had on dealers. People paying cash was bad for their business because they made money from banks, finance companies, and even insurance companies for referring customers their way. My bike wasn't new, but it was worth a lot more than I paid for it, and it was a damn good ride, scary fast. And so I sat, thinking that I had the world by the tail. Then everything collapsed. We were still living in our small house because there was too much emotion invested in it to let go. It took us 5 years to save up the down payment, and we were very lucky to buy during the recession of the early 2000s when the housing market crashed. We paid probably 60% of its actual cost and worked tirelessly to improve it, pouring every extra penny into it. Now that we had the money, we were talking about expanding it, adding a bedroom or two, and maybe filling them up. Not too soon. I was 33 and Darla was 31, and time passed. I worked from home in a shed that I built specifically for this purpose. It was well equipped and comfortable, with all the amenities of a work office. I told Bobby I needed my space, and it was true. I tried to work from home, but she kept coming in and talking, seriously interfering with my workflow at times. I especially got a lot done on the days when she went out on the sailboat, which happened today when we spent time at the lake house. I was still working and had a small office on the first floor. I used the internet almost exclusively for research, but I had a small collection of books that helped me a lot, and I kept them to myself. I thought I needed one of these for a story I was working on, and after searching around the office and part of the house, I realized I had left it at the lake house. Since I was just going to stop by, pick it up, and come right back, I took the motorcycle, covering 25 miles in a surprisingly short time. Of all my toys, this was probably my favorite. There were no cars in the driveway, but I didn't expect it. I parked the bike and ran inside, passing the bedroom on the way to the office. Something made me stop and go back. She stood on the patio, looking out over the lake, wearing one of my t-shirts. One side had slipped off her shoulder, exposing the straps of her black bra. "I love this view so much," she said. She clearly heard me. "I liked it too," I replied, "not anymore." She screamed and turned around sharply, raising her hem and showing off her curvaceous buttocks. "Miles, what are you doing here?" The better question would be, what are you doing here almost without clothes when you should have been on a sailboat on the lake? I know that look. Who is it? She began to stutter, making excuses when the door swung open, and her sailing instructor walked inside. "Damn, night is so exciting, isn't it, honey?" he said. "I brought what you wanted." His voice died when he saw me. "Then panic," I said. "Mr. Molson, it's not what you think. What it looks like is that you're not out on the lake doing what I'm paying you to do. It seems it was more about an intim than teaching. But maybe you were teaching her new things. Don't lie. Just leave. It goes without saying that your services are no longer required, a fact that I will explain in detail to your boss. Go. I don't have transportation. Then walk. You have just enough time to get away before I catch up with you. But if I catch up with you, all you can do is crawl. Your choice." He was a lean guy, about 5 feet 9 inches tall, with the deep tan of someone who spends a lot of time on the water, good cheekbones, and handsome eyes. I was going to shut them both down, maybe knock that dimple out of his chin, and he realized it. He was already 2 steps ahead of me when he rushed to the door, and I stood and watched as he ran down the driveway. When I turned around, she was standing behind me. "Dear, I just..." "Stop, Darla. It is what it is. You couldn't be happy, could you? You wanted everything, and you almost got it. Now you'll get a little, but it won't be what it could have been. You'll never have to work. I want you to think about me sometimes when your legs hurt or when your last lover leaves, and realize what you've lost." She let out a small, strangled cry and reached toward me. "Don't touch me. I'm not sure how I'll react. Go sit on the couch now." Darla jumped at the volume of my voice and hurried to the couch. I took the moment to walk out the door, pausing long enough to take out the knife I'd carried since I was 12 and slash 2 of her tires, knowing that it would take her time to replace them. I was in no hurry to go home. Driving a motorcycle while angry is not a good idea, so I tried to remain calm. When I got home, I packed a small backpack, got back on the motorcycle, and rode for 6 hours before stopping in a small town in Virginia. I checked into a small private motel, paying cash. I had to provide a credit card as a guarantee, but if they didn't use it, there would be no record of my stay. The owners recommended a small restaurant within walking distance, and the simple food was well prepared and seasoned overall, very satisfactory. I memorized everything for future use in a scene in one of my novels. By the time I left, I was already an old friend, and 2 different couples offered to take me back to the motel. I thanked them but told them I needed to for a walk to warm up after 6 hours on the bike. I stayed the next night and went to the local mall for a change of clothes, choosing jeans and a t-shirt. I returned to the motel, and the 60-year-old woman who drove it was waiting for me. "Miles' son, I knew you were familiar to me. Will you sign my book?" she asked, holding 3 books, 1 for her and 2 for her friends. "Wait until the girls in my book club see this, a real living writer staying at my motel. I wish they could meet you." The lady was very kind in the short time I knew her, and it made me smile. "When is your meeting?" I asked. "Tonight. How about having a writer speak to your club? It would be nice to talk to real people for a change." I seriously thought she was going to faint. "Are you serious? It's better than looking at the walls and the TV tonight. But I'm going to need one thing," I added. She insisted on taking me to the local bookstore. I was amazed that independent bookstores still existed, and I bought every copy of my latest novel they had in stock. Before I left, I posed for a few photos, including one in front of the store where the logo was clearly visible. The only thing I asked was that the photos not be published for at least 24 hours. By then, I would be far away. All 12 ladies from the book club were delighted, but it only lasted 45 minutes. Then came the candid questions characteristic of small town and country people, which, while not offensive, were thought-provoking. Why did this character go in this direction while the other one chose not to? What made me reconcile the lovers in the end? Shouldn't she have been punished more for her misdeeds? Then I understood. I didn't need to punish Darla. I just needed to get her out of my life. Yes, she'll probably end up with a few $1 million, but how long will she have it? I already have 7 new novels planned, and I don't have to work on them before the divorce. Then she will have no rights to any profits I earn. My money will hopefully continue to come in and increase, while hers will soon dwindle to 0. At the end of the meeting, I thanked the ladies for their hospitality, and after about 1 million photos, we parted. Marge insisted that I have breakfast with her and her family before I left the next morning. Her husband made me sign an action-adventure he had, telling me how much he enjoyed it. I promised him copies of my new works as soon as they came out and headed south on my motorcycle. Before I left, I turned on my phone, listened to the almost constant pings as all the messages and texts came in, and called my lawyer. He seemed glad to hear from me. After he spoke, I asked him a few questions. I know this is not your area of expertise, so I want you to find me a really good divorce lawyer. I need your advice on how to protect future profits so they don't end up in my soon-to-be ex's pockets. Tell me what needs to be done and help organize it. When you find someone, report it as soon as possible. Our laws do not require an explanation for the reasons for divorce, so simply state irreconcilable differences and ask her not to complicate the situation. If she does, tell her I'm willing to hold out indefinitely, but all expenses will be at her expense according to her part of the contract. My intellectual property lawyer, who had been working for 30 years and had encountered this situation many times, called an old friend known as the toughest shark in the state, and she agreed to represent me. He also told me to stop working on whatever I was doing. If I couldn't do it, then not to tell anyone. At his insistence, I called a lawyer and explained the situation. She asked me some very direct questions about my fidelity and breathed a sigh of relief after my answers. What's on the surface, we can't deny, and we can't avoid paying her what she deserves. I'm very glad you don't have a problem with that. I have to ask, if you're being so generous with her, is there a chance for reconciliation? If so, you can save a lot of money by stopping it now. I have no problem giving her what she's due. She supported me when many people laughed or dismissed my writing as stupid, and then laughed at the same people when I became successful. She deserves some of that money, but not what I earn in advance. How difficult will it be? It's not at all difficult if you don't post anything until at least 3 months after the divorce. I can wait 6 if I have to. Then I'll have to give something to the publisher, otherwise it's a breach of contract. Do you think she will resist? I have no idea, but at one point I didn't think she would cheat. If she resists or insists on counseling, I will become unavailable. I may have to do some research that will take me out of the country for a while. It might work, it might not. A lot depends on the judge we get. Are your assets protected? I didn't even think about it, but we really didn't have a lot of cash in the bank back then, maybe $25,000 to $30,000. I checked after I hung up, and there was $10 left in the account. We have 5 credit cards, and I hastily canceled them all. I called the lawyer again, and she told me not to worry unless it was needed, and we would take it out of the agreement. She instructed me to contact the bank and my investment advisor, who liquidated a couple of assets and transferred $50,000 to a new account in my name only. He then froze all funds until the divorce was finalized. The next day, I received a new credit card and used it while traveling. Before continuing on my way, I returned to the yacht club and asked to speak to the manager. He appeared smiling and asked if my wife had enjoyed learning to sail. I have no idea. As far as I can tell, all her instructor taught her was how to be better in bed. I just wanted to tell you to your face what your employee is doing and let you know that future lessons will not be paid for by me. You can check if the payment went through. If she continues to engage, I could sue. I wouldn't win anything, but I would make sure it would cost you personally and the club a lot of money in legal fees. Terminate him immediately, and this will all be over. The manager didn't even blink. I'm really sorry. It's not our intention to destroy marriages. He'll be back from class in about 15 minutes. Would you like to be present when he's dismissed? Since you asked so politely, 20 minutes later, the man approached the pier with a boat and tied it to the dock. The woman he was training looked like a typical housewife in her 40s, but he rubbed her fifth place and whispered in her ear. She winced and buttoned her blouse just as the manager approached. Good lesson, Mrs. Martin. Did Alvin teach you anything today? Alvin? I suddenly had a mental image of him as a chipmunk, which made me smile. Mrs. Martin answered shyly. The manager nodded with a smile. I'm afraid this will be your last lesson for a while unless you find another instructor. My other 3 are busy until the cold weather. Alvin will be leaving us soon. Alvin seemed surprised. As the woman hurried away, the manager grabbed him by the collar. I had a very interesting conversation this morning, Alvin. Are you familiar with the name Miles Molson? He turned pale. His wife is one of my students. Yes, Mr. Molson told me that you've been teaching her some very interesting things all this time. I warned you the last time my husband complained. You'll have to leave. Alvin, empty your locker and leave the premises. You're not allowed to come here. My father will be in full agreement when I discuss this with him at dinner this evening. Remember, he is one of the founders of this club and chairman of the board. He will be very unhappy if rumors of your misdeeds begin to spread. I think you know how frustrated you will be. 5 years of college and you're not even close to finishing your degree. I'm giving you free advice. Hold on tight to your butt for the next 2 months or you might find out how cold the world can be, especially if you're paying your way. Go now. Take your things and leave. He sighed, slumping his shoulders and looked straight at my smirk. I must take revenge on you. You can try. Let's see how your training compares to village kung fu. The Commodore, as everyone who knew him called him, laughed. Alvin, play at your leisure, preferably away from here. Go away, you old man. I'll beat you first. He looked at me as I laughed. Can I watch you try? The Commodore is a retired Special Boat Service soldier and a veteran of 2 wars. Plus, I know he holds advanced belts in 2 martial arts. Do you mind if I film this? It will look great on Instagram. I can already see the headline, Young Pump gets his 5th place kicked by a 70-year-old man. You'll go viral in no time. He looked between me and the Commodore, noting our grinning faces. The Commodore spoke in a quiet but humorous voice. That's not entirely true, Mr. Molson. I'm actually 71. I'll be sure to fix this when I post. Alvin realized there was no upside to this situation, so he simply walked past us, muttering and making vague threats. The Commodore sighed and extended his hand. Perhaps you can ask my wife if she intends to pay for the parking of her boat. The payment expires in 3 days. I'll discuss this with her. I'm truly sorry about your situation, Mr. Molson. Thank you. I'm sorry too. We shook hands again, and I walked away, wondering what kind of reception Darla would give when she came to her next class. But by then, Alvin would have already called her and told her everything. I'd love to hear that conversation. I spent the next 4 months offline, heading south, paying cash, and staying under the radar. When I got to Florida, I boarded a plane to Bice, rented a small bungalow, turned on the Wi-Fi, and got to work. I called my lawyer once a month for updates. In the 2nd month, we had a long conversation. She came to see me twice. I turned her down both times, citing ethics. Then she came with a lawyer. When she made an appointment, she was very disappointed when I refused to give her your contact information. Any more instructions? Continue. When will this be heard in court? In about a month and a little later. Will you come? Do I have to be there? It would be better if you showed up, but I can plead commitments abroad, and the judge might accept that. Maybe not. We'll see. Let me know. To prevent my lawyer from being a liar, I asked my agent to arrange several television appearances in Europe, including the Graham Norton show. It was one of his highest-rated shows. As I talked about my upbringing, he couldn't help but laugh when I described snipe hunting. The actors on the couch next to me laughed so hard they needed tissues, and the French star let out a grunt that sparked another burst of laughter. I received a couple of invitations to spend time on a yacht or a country estate, but declined them as gracefully as possible, citing legal obligations. I decided to wear my wedding ring until the end of the divorce process and used it as a shield when a French woman suggested spending a few days on the Côte d'Azur. She seemed confused that marriage vows could make a difference. I showed up in Germany, Sweden, and Italy in the following weeks, racking up my frequent traveler miles. The Amazon movies came out and were very well received. My publisher tried to move my deadline forward, but I asked my lawyer and agent to hold their ground, promising that I would deliver the work on time. I called my divorce lawyer, and she gave me an update. You're on the agenda for next Monday. You don't have to be there, but I suggest you show up. She's challenging the agreement, but once the judge sees it, I have no doubt he'll approve it. Well, okay, I said. I had already given her half of everything we had saved up so far, which was almost $3 million. I left our little house to her and insisted on selling the lake house. This was a moot point because she really wanted to keep it. That would never happen. I would burn the place down before I gave her the home she had turned into a nest of betrayal. She would also receive half of the proceeds from the Netflix deal. My business lawyer advised me that if I waited long enough for a romance film deal, she might end up getting nothing. Without this, it would still amount to a net of about $5 million. She would keep her car and her little house, while I would keep my truck and motorcycle, and we would go our separate ways. How difficult could it be? Very much, as it turned out. I arrived in town on the day of the trial, not showing up until the case was called. Darla's eyes widened when she saw me, and she tried to get up, but her lawyer held her down. She looked very neat, but seemed to have lost a little weight. She should be happy about that. She always said she wished she were 10 pounds lighter. The judge was an older woman with a steely face and praised me for being transparent about our financial situation. Most men, especially at your level of wealth, would fight tooth and nail, she said. But I caught her sleeping with someone else. We were complete partners in everything we did. She deserves what she gets, and I'm not complaining about it. Your wife insists on counseling. How do you feel about this? Madam, Your Honor, we grew up in very humble circumstances. I was raised in the Baptist Church and am very conservative in matters of fidelity. While I have no objection to the division of our assets, I do not see the need to continue our marriage. She violated my trust, and she'll never get it back. In my opinion, trust is on par with love and a marriage commitment. No amount of counseling in the world could convince me otherwise, so I think it would be a waste of everyone's time. Mr. Molson, Mrs. Molson, you are no longer husband and wife. Try to live well and don't find yourselves in front of me again. Next, Darla's lawyer jumped up from his seat in outrage. That's it? No chance for reconciliation unless one of the parties wants it? No, the judge replied. She's getting a very good deal. She's young, still attractive, and gets a pretty big chunk of money, so she's not in danger of destitution. She should be able to start over. Maybe she'll learn some lessons, or maybe not. I don't need to remind you that this is a no-fault divorce state. If one party doesn't want to be married, they don't have to explain why. Leave it as it is. And just like that, I was no longer married. She tried to change the financial agreement twice, once when my new book came out and again when the movie deal was finalized, but my lawyers worked hard and it was unsuccessful. Her final share of our fortune was just over $6 million. My fortune seemed to have increased during our divorce. Most people live their entire lives without accumulating that much. She should have been happy. It took her about 1.5 years and $1 million spent to become sustainable again. I believe she eventually came to her senses, kicked out whoever was sharing her bed, and took stock of her life. Darla put her house up for sale, moved to the big city, bought a condominium, and went to college. She was a good student and was always upset that we couldn't afford college. I didn't know what her major was, and the only reason I knew anything was because her sister was still my friend on Facebook. I found that I enjoyed my time traveling on a motorcycle, so every couple of months, I would go on a week-long trip. I'd just pick a direction and go. I've always loved long hair, and now that I had the means, I let it grow. I didn't like beards, so I stayed shaven, always wore good clothes, and almost never encountered the police on my travels. One police officer in South Carolina caught me driving just 4 miles per hour over the speed limit. Perhaps the small town needed money and started adding points to the fine. I didn't complain, although he seemed to be hoping for a chance to send me to prison. He was shocked when I showed up in court on the appointed day and asked to see the footage from his body camera. He spat and stammered before admitting that he had turned it off when he went to the toilet and forgot to turn it back on. There was a big discussion about whether this recording was admissible, and I shrugged and let my lawyer tell them that if they rejected it, it would be on social media. Before I left the parking lot, the judge looked at the tape in his office, came out, dismissed all the charges except the speeding ticket, fined me $100, and released me. The policeman and prosecutor were having a deep discussion with the judge as I left. I left the city as quickly as possible. I did get beaten up in a little bar in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, in a fight that I didn't start or have any interest in. When the bar fight started, they must have thought I was with the other guys. When the police figured it out, they wanted to know what my connection was. I don't have one. I just stopped for a beer, I explained. The deputy sheriff smiled as she returned my license. Wrong place at the wrong time, huh? Well, at least you can put it in the book. She recognized my name, and before they left, we had to take a photo with both groups of police. The owner's wife wanted a photo as well as some visitors. I had a few more beers with them before the police officer followed me to my hotel and then returned after work. We spent most of the weekend in bed, only going out to eat. She followed me on Facebook and other social networks, and I sent her the book from time to time. Wanda invited me to her wedding, they seemed very happy together. One of the reasons I liked hanging out in bars and small eateries was because of the stories I heard. Many of them have appeared in my works to one degree or another, and I've smiled when I received messages saying that they saw something almost the same or that an event from the book actually happened to them. I probably wrote about them. Over the next 3 years, I released another Western, a novel, and a fantasy set in a post-apocalyptic world. They all sold well, but the fantasy was the most successful, which surprised me a lot. All of them were offered to film production companies. I was invited to the set of the fantasy film and spent 2 days there, enthusiastically learning the tricks of the makeup artists and special effects specialists. I met the stars briefly but spent most of my time not with them. I enjoyed watching magic being created more than magicians performing tricks. Those involved in westerns found out about this and invited me as well. I even appeared in a movie as a bad guy in a scene where I was hanged. It was a little creepy, but the setup was safe and the noose was loose. They told me not to shave for 4 or 5 days, then I sat in the makeup chair where they oiled my hair, rubbed mud into my face, and painted my teeth. I definitely didn't look like the main character when they were done. I asked them not to credit me in the film because it was just for fun. They smiled, saying that most writers would like to be credited. I didn't approach the novel, although when I saw the bedroom scene at the premiere, I regretted not being involved. I traveled, dated, and had 2 fairly long-term relationships, but they both fizzled out. Darla graduated from college with a degree in interior design and sent me an invitation. I didn't go but sent her a very nice graduation gift and referred a couple of people to the company where she worked. I was in the publisher's office discussing contract details when I met Helen. She was of average height and could use about 15 pounds to lose, but she wore them well and was generally very attractive. The word lush came to mind. She had a cute little mouth, a snub nose, jet black hair, and very blue eyes. I kept wondering where I had seen her before, and my agent noticed. This is Montoya, host of one of the most popular cooking shows on television. She's here.